is the grain. The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists.
What up?
Trying to adapt the world to himself.
When I talk, you pay attention. Hardest rap, these verbal lynches. Hard facts, stolen hidden. You hope you never find that it existed. When you real, and it don't pan out, you just smile, cause you never expect the handout. Plus the roads to success come with toll booths. You just learn to write it down and map this plan out. Now what you thinking, but what it's proven. Now what you did, for what you doing. Now who you is, the way you moving. You play to win, but still you losing. You play the game, you played it right. That nigga told, he ain't your type. Some niggas fold, some niggas dice. That many hoes, some shit is tripe.
The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable one persists. Trying to adapt the world to himself.
What up? How y'all doing this morning? A little behind, but wanted to get with y'all in this morning convo. Because I had a real special gift this morning dealing with the convo. A couple conversations. One of the things was the history of Wilmington, North Carolina, and what happened, and just some context on it. And I wanted to watch it with y'all and see how y'all felt about it. Also, I wanted to tell you about another case that I found out about a guy named, give me a second, a guy named Louis Allen, which is, the case is bugged out. Something that happened in the past, because the FBI is opening up old cases of justice, so-called, and trying to find justice for him that was never solved at one time. So the first thing we're going to start with this morning is a story about what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, and how it relates to our history. You know what I'm saying? So let's get it.
'98, or the Wilmington Race Riot of 1898, occurred in Wilmington, North Carolina on November 10, 1898. It is considered a turning point in post-Reconstruction North Carolina politics. The event initiated an era of more severe racial segregation and effective disenfranchisement of African Americans throughout the South, a shift already underway since passage by Mississippi of a new constitution in 1890, raising barriers to voter registration. Laura Edwards wrote in Democracy Betrayed, 2000, "What happened in Wilmington became an affirmation of white supremacy not just in that one city, but in the South and in the nation as a whole. As it affirmed that invoking whiteness eclipsed the legal citizenship, individual rights, and equal protection under the law of blacks, it was originally
Hold on, I'm going to give you a better one. I didn't realize that this was this one that I clicked was the wrong one. Give me a second. The reason being is this is a Wikipedia. I'm not going to bore y'all with this, but it's something. This Wilmington, North Carolina shit is crazy. Give me one quick second. Here we go.
Power? There was one thing you weren't allowed to research.
We were refused. We were rejected by the librarian.
When I asked about or inquired about 1898, they wanted to know why.
I was told that, yes, they had something, but they kept it under lock and key.
The story of Wilmington in 1898 still isn't widely known.
What happened here on what's now just this empty patch of grass would radically change racial politics in North Carolina.
This is the story of an American election, but also of something we don't usually find in American history: the violent overthrow of a democratically elected government.
Today is the day. If you ain't paid attention at all, I need you to pay attention, because they're about to break down a lot of things about the Republicans and the Democrats.
In the late 1800s, Wilmington, North Carolina was the state's largest city. It had a majority black population, and historians today describe it as a rarity in the post-Civil War American South.
Wilmington, prior to November 1898, was what the New South could be at the cusp of the 20th century.
There was an unusual degree of black prosperity.
In Wilmington, there were successful black entrepreneurs, doctors, teachers, but also black elected officials. And for a time, that was true throughout the state. Take a look at the politicians on this poster of the 1889 North Carolina House of Representatives. Here at the bottom are Black Republican representatives, some from Wilmington. North Carolina also sent 4 Black Republicans to the 1889 North Carolina House of Representatives. Here at the bottom are Black Republican representatives.
Black Republicans. So it goes back to, I'm showing you when the Moore said that the Republic was for us. They're going to keep showing you the party of Republican was all black people. See this? These are all what we call black people, or Moors, whatever we want to call them, right? But the Republicans.
Some from Wilmington. North Carolina also sent 4 Black Republicans to the U.S. Congress between 1875 and 1899. The Democratic and Republican parties of 1898 in many ways occupied opposite parts of the political spectrum than they do today.
Most African Americans were voting for the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was white voters almost exclusively. White supremacy.
And it's still going on. I'm going to go back a little bit because I want y'all to ingest what they're telling us.
Democratic Party was white voters almost exclusively. White supremacy was the central focus of the platform for the Democratic Party.
Republicans in North Carolina were successful in part because of a third party called the Populist Party, made up of mostly white farmers fed up with the tough economic times. North Carolina populists joined up with Republicans to form what they called the Fusion Party. And in the elections of 1894 and 1896, the Fusion Party defeated the Democrats in sweeping victories statewide. That meant North Carolina now had a government that shared power between black and white politicians, including a newly elected Republican governor. Together, they moved towards reforms that would favor black Americans and working class whites.
This was something that the Democratic Party folks were simply not going to accept.
My only point is the Democratic Party back then was the arm of white supremacy. The Democrat Party today is still the arm of white supremacy. They just do it with a smile on their face and then buried the fucking history of what they was doing and how they was going about it. That's what's very important about this part of history. It's showing you that the Republicans were black people, and then there was another party that joined them that gave them power, which was the white wealthy farmers. And that was the Populist Party. They wasn't the wealthy, what we call whites, using the terms we understand, or the wealthy Europeans. They was kind of like the ones on the farm. They wasn't as wealthy. And they end up taking sides with the wealthy blacks, the farmers, right?
Multiracial government wasn't just a disappointment for Democrats. It was more like a humiliation. They needed a plan to take back control of the state in the next election. So party leaders like Furnifold Simmons, future U.S. Senator, Charles Aycock, future North Carolina governor, and this man, Alfred Moore Waddell, came up with one: to beat the Fusion Party by luring white populist.
I gotta go back. I gotta give y'all a better angle of this screen. Forgive me for stopping. It's just some important information. We can watch old things, and whether they mean to or not, they can start to give us back history and tapping into our real power by documentaries, and they might not realize it by telling us. Now, I wanted to give y'all a better look on the screen. Let's get it.
So party leaders like Furnifold Simmons, future U.S. Senator, Charles Aycock, future North Carolina governor, and this man, Alfred Moore Waddell, came up with one: to beat the Fusion Party by luring white populist voters away from their alliance.
So all of these was the Republicans, right? And they're just showing you some of the 3 of the same pictures, but that tell you that they had a campaign and they pulled all of the whites away from the wealthy blacks.
With black voters.
And it's 1800s.
Wilmington, with a large black population and a local fusion government in power, would be a focus of their campaign. The State Democratic Party Handbook for 1898 laid out their goal: consolidate the white vote by stoking white anger and resentment. It said, "This is a white man's country, and white men must control and govern it."
This is the same playbook Donald Trump just used.
Their most effective tool was the media. One of North Carolina's biggest newspapers was a Democratic Party mouthpiece. It ran racist political cartoons throughout 1898.
Not everybody was literate in 1898, but to see a political cartoon of the type that ran You may not be able to read it, but you know exactly what it means.
Many of the cartoons were centered on the threat of Negro rule, even though the fusion government was mostly white. They also played up another fear.
Black men threatening white women became a theme. White men need to do all that they can to protect white womanhood.
This was all part of North Carolina Democratic strategy, but it echoed the national racist rhetoric of the time. In one speech that Democrats printed in Wilmington paper, a prominent Georgia writer named Rebecca Felton said,
"If it takes lynching a black man a day to protect white womanhood, I say lynch."
Her speech.
If I say hanging a black man a day to protect white womanhood, but they said Garvey was fucking bugging when he said for every time they kill a Negro, we're gonna kill a white man in Africa. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we gotta think about this shit. And then remember that this is the late 1800s, so we gonna realize that after slavery, the slaves had all the skills to trade, so we went on an economical boom for 100 years. And then they was like, fuck that. So 1800s, there must have been so many wealthy blacks, as we're learning, that's why they came up with Jim Crow. But the problem was Jim Crow hit and it only tripled the black dollar again. Would have made it, instead of it tripling, it went times 100 because they forced us to spend our dollar with each other. So then they had to stop that shit. That's what I'm starting to realize.
Each prompted a Wilmington black man named Alex Manley, owner of the Black-run Daily Record newspaper, to respond with a column. He made a simple observation that, at the time, was shocking.
That white women who had liaisons with black men did so voluntarily and enthusiastically.
Manley wrote, "Every Negro lynched is called a big, burly black brute, when in fact, many were sufficiently attractive for white girls to fall in love with them."
Manley pretty much said, in a nutshell, sometimes white women choose to be with black men.
Manley's editorial became another tool for Democrats. Newspapers reprinted it, called it a horrid slander, and ran comments about it on a daily basis. It was just a few months before the election, and white voters were angry.
By the time the election rolls around on November 8th, black voters, Republican voters, had been thoroughly intimidated here.
By all accounts, the elections of 1898 were a sham. The Democratic Party had a paramilitary group called the Red Shirts. They attacked and blocked black residents from voting. At a rally just before the election, Alfred Moore Waddell provoked the crowds. He said, "Negro office holding ought at once and forever be brought to an end, even if we have to choke the current of the Cape Fear River with carcasses." The votes were counted, and the Democrats won.
Democratic candidates won every seat. They had a candidate up for election.
So during the time it was time to vote, these motherfuckers standing in front of the voting booths with guns and shit, and wouldn't let us vote. You know what I mean? Like, so it's good to know the tactics of the past. Cause I just be wanting y'all to recognize that, yo, when the ancient scriptures or any book saying nothing new under the sun, like, it's a reason. Like, the same, there's nothing, we have to realize that we going through right now what happens every 100 years of when they want to suppress the colored people. You know what I'm saying? Or the so-called people of color.
But some local fusionist politicians remained in power because their seats hadn't been up for re-election, like the white Republican mayor and the Board of Aldermen. And of course, the election did nothing to undo the economic power black folks held in the...
Look at that shit. I want y'all to take a deep picture of that. Everybody right now, take a screenshot. Let me give you a better view. I want to tell y'all something about a picture. Picture worth 1,000 words. All the people standing up are wealthier. All the people sitting down are kind of like assistants. So not so much assistants, but like less wealthy in a lower position. That's the point of a picture, the person standing above, right? Take a screenshot. All right, let's get it. That's what we call black power.
City. The Democrats had won the election, but their goal of total white supremacist control remained out of reach.
And so they engineered what was essentially a coup d'etat.
The day after the election, at a gathering for white men in Wilmington,
Let me pause it. Coup d'etat. I learned this when I was studying about what happened to the Moors and how the Europeans overthrew the Moors in America while we in the position we in today. And what happened was there was a coup d'etat that happens. That's when, that's like on a ship. If a coup d'etat happens, that means that's like when the ship goes against the captain. You know what I'm saying? Or when majority of the ship goes against the captain. So that's what a coup d'etat is, when a government goes at wars with itself to overthrow people.
Democrats unveiled a document called the White Declaration of Independence. It contained an ultimatum. Cynthia Brown, whose descendants were in Wilmington back in 1898, is a historian at her church where there's a preserved copy of the declaration from the next day's newspaper.
We will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin.
They would strip black men of voting rights. They would give white men a large part of the employment heretofore given to black men. And as for Alex Manly, we demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours. The next morning, hundreds of white newspaper.
So they came out with a newspaper. And with the newspaper, it was their Declaration of Independence. It was really the white supremacist declaration, and this is what they wrote, if y'all paid attention.
We will no longer be ruled and will never again be ruled by men of African origin.
So that means that the men of North Carolina were so wealthy. We also got to remember, wasn't that car company in North Carolina? So they never really tell you too much. You know what I mean? So I'm just giving y'all clues, context clues of what y'all should be searching and looking up to find more information.
They would strip black men of...
It says the Negro has demonstrated by antagonizing our interests in every way, and especially by his ballot, that he is incapable of realizing that his interests are and should be identical with those of the community. You got to think about how well we must have been doing. That the progressive element in any community is the white population. Right? And that giving of nearly all the employment to Negro laborers has been against the best interests of the country and city, and is a sufficient reason why the city of Wilmington, with its natural advantages, have not become a city of at least 50,000 inhabitants. So that means that these black men, as I quote, were so wealthy that it really irritated, right, the Democrats. And that's why I be telling y'all look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton are like the closest thing to Republicans. Like what we think of Republicans today, we think of the Republicans as the Democrats and the Democrats as the Republicans, right? But it basically is flipped around. But technically, Joe Biden is a true Democrat. Hillary Clinton, they're true Democrats. They really don't give a fuck about you. And that's why this is important. Understanding that when I told y'all a month ago on Live or Through the Years, and I told y'all that the Republicans was where we were supposed to sit, niggas thought I was bugging.
Voting rights. They would give white men a large part of the employment heretofore given to black men. And as for Alex Manly, we demand that he leave this city forever within 24 hours. The next morning, hundreds of white men marched to the offices of the Daily Record. Manly was gone. He had fled to save his own life. They set the Daily Record building on fire. This is where it once stood.
Once the white leadership destroyed Alex Manly's printing press, they destroyed one way in which the African American community in Wilmington could organize itself and keep itself informed.
At City Hall, the mayor and board of aldermen were forced out.
There's 200 armed men in City Hall at the time. They didn't do it of their own free will. And as they resigned, a new member selected by the Democratic Party was voted into office.
Waddell, who once threatened to fill the Cape Fear River with black bodies, was the new mayor of Wilmington. Meanwhile, the mob...
So then we got to ask ourselves why he chose to use the Cape Fear. So apparently, life comes from water. So if you understand history, and all ancient civilizations live by the water. So there's a reason why he made the term, I will choke the Cape Fear River with black bodies. Because it's a place where the population from America that was indigenous definitely lived by this river. Because wherever there's a river like the Nile, that's where life lived. Because like Dr. Ben said, before men traveled on wheel, they traveled on boat.
Had grown to about 2,000 men, and the violence spilled into the streets. In these photos, X's mark where the first Black residents were killed.
The stories are that they were dumped into the river, and there are varying stories about how many people were killed.
I see 40 to 60 clearly as fatalities as a result of the violence, but I think it was higher.
Many Black residents hid for days in the swamps and the wooded cemeteries in the city, including Cynthia's great-grandmother. And thousands of other residents fled Wilmington, never to return. Shortly,
it was another Black Wall Street, is what I'm telling y'all. Wilmington was another Black Wall Street, but it was wealthy Blacks that lived there. And that's why they were upset.
Afterward, Democrats printed booklets celebrating a glorious victory, and in the newspapers depicted Black residents as the instigators.
This image is a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened during 1898. You know, what you see is African-American men with guns, not white men with machine guns.
That's what propaganda is. If y'all never understood what people mean when they break down propaganda, because I think that people have to understand it in the smallest form to digest it. Propaganda is like in a war. If me and my homeboys go down the street and we beat up a whole bunch of white people and do a whole bunch of crazy shit, destroy their buildings, but we control the press and we control the video cameras and we control the outlets, and we go, and back then when the TV ain't as big, and we get newspaper drawing of white men beating up Negroes, and then we can get a whole bunch of reactions off of it. And that's exactly what they did. That's what propaganda is.
The city never regained its Black majority population.
First ball, Wall Street.
Jim Crow laws like literacy tests and poll taxes that prevented Black people from voting were immediately enacted, and Wilmington's spirit of Black opportunity was crushed. Black political representation in the state was over. It would be 90 years until North Carolina elected its next Black Congress member.
Wilmington did a really great job of covering up a very dark past for.
So understand that this history has been under lock and key in Wilmington for 100, 200, it's been on lock and key. It's been on lock and key for a minute, because it ain't, you know what I'm saying? So understand that they had to really argue and fight to get these documents, because they didn't even want to release it. So we have to realize, as I'm showing you, in the next month or so, I'm going to take y'all on a trip down some of the craziest roads, but in order for, we need to see this shit, because to fix this problem, we have to definitely realize to stop getting in our feelings and understand that this is what they bout. This is the shit that they on. This is how they keep control, and this is how they keep power.
For a very long time.
Over the years, the textbooks on North Carolina's history have struggled to accurately describe what happened in 1898. This one from 1933 says the situation was unfortunate for both races. And this one from 1978 doesn't have that much more detail. But they both praise Charles Aycock, a politician who helped perpetrate the riot. They say he had a keen mind and a kind heart, and that, in fact, he was one of the best friends that the colored people had in the state.
It's a legacy that North Carolina has yet to fully undo. The names of the perpetrators are on Wilmington's school buildings and city parks. But the legacy is also bigger than those names. Turn on the news, and the state's long history of political suppression echoes.
And we turn to a strict new voter ID law in North Carolina. Racial gerrymandering and a push for new voting maps.
The court says the Republican-led legislature redrew congressional districts along racial lines, violating the...
All right, so let me tell y'all what happened politically at the time. This was a double move. It was spiritual, it was physical, it was on both sides. So they pushed them out of North Carolina, and then it took them almost 100 years to put another person in office. At that time, they didn't call themselves Black. So let's remember that too. So we need to ask ourselves, we don't know what they consider themselves. But they pushed them out 100 years later, and then what they're showing you at the end of this piece is that when you dealing with voter ID, now they're saying that the cattle needs identification to come and vote. So let me express voting, because this is an argument I've had for 7 years, and I went to Broughton when I came out for Jersey, and I had a teacher where I went to school with a lot of Europeans, and no disrespect, who thought that they could outwit me in this situation. I will voluntarily, on TV, debate anybody who dares challenge that our vote counts, but I will show you where our vote counts. For presidency, our vote doesn't count. Voting counts in one way. Let me explain. North Carolina get 25 electoral votes, right? That's the people that get to go to D.C. That's House of Representatives. That's everything. Like all of the people that go, right? The Senate, the governor, the mayor. You get 25 people that sit in D.C., right? Or in the White House. Those 25 people, keep them in mind. Now, we vote for them as we understand it, right? Now, when the president election comes up, it's called the popular vote because they just want to see what the public thinks, right? But you remember those 25 people you elected? They go in a room and they're considered the electoral votes. Each one of the 25 is a vote for the electoral college, right? And they sit in a room. So we vote, and let's say we say Obama, 85 in North Carolina said Obama win. Those 25 people sat in a room and they all voted. And whoever got 13 took all 25. So the electoral votes for every state is the people. Your vote counts by who you put in office, not by who you vote for during the presidential election. Right, the electoral college, but those are the people. I think New Jersey has 42 because it goes by the population. So depending on how many people in your population, then it has a number that's associated with how many people to get to sit in D.C., right? This is civics and economics, right? And they used to tell me like, I didn't know. No, I'm telling you. So if you want your vote to count, then you need to vote for when you vote for your House of Representatives, your senators and all of that, you need to be holding them accountable and asking them for something. North Carolina, this ain't it. North Carolina also still legally has the right to sterilize children and don't give nobody no consent. So if your daughter is 16 and she has a baby, or 14 or 15 and underage has a baby, they can write down undesirable and they can sterilize her and the child and don't have to tell her or the child. Check me. You remember that documentary I was showing y'all with the eugenics? That lady from North Carolina? When I went to that's what she was going to. It's still legal. In the state of North Carolina, it's still legal. Just like the 3/5 compromise is still legal. So if they can mark you undesirable and sterilize your child, woman, whether girl or boy, and sterilize the woman. Because remember, separation is church and state, but we don't understand that the church is a state, right? Meaning that a state legally isn't North Carolina. It's like the courthouse is a state. The Baptist church, the Christian church, that's a state. Those are states. Right? So I'm going to move on to this next part. Let's get to another crazy case that I found.
60 Minutes Rewind.
5 years ago, the FBI announced that it was reopening more than 100 unsolved murder cases from the civil rights era of the 1950s and 60s. The goal of the Cold Case Initiative was to try and mete out justice in what seemed to be racially motivated killings that were never prosecuted. Not many 50-year-old cold cases ever get solved. Memories fade, evidence is lost, witnesses and suspects die or disappear. But that's not the case in the death of Louis Allen, a mostly forgotten but historically significant murder that helped bring thousands of white college students to Mississippi in the Freedom Summer of 1964. The murder is still unsolved, but the case has never quite gone away because the chief suspect is very much alive and walking the streets of a town called Liberty. Liberty, Mississippi is a small rural logging town not far from the Louisiana border. The FBI believes that some people here have been keeping a dark secret for nearly 50 years from one of the ugliest periods in the state's history.
You will not be allowed to proceed past this point today.
It was a time when civil rights activists were beaten and arrested, when state and local politics were controlled by all-white citizens' councils, and when people like Louis Allen were murdered in cold blood without redress.
You keep a photo of Louis Allen on your desk?
I do.
Why?
The case bothers me. I feel like we failed, and not just the FBI, but law enforcement.
Cynthia Deedle is a 15-year veteran of the FBI's Civil Rights Division, and until a few weeks ago was in charge of the Cold Case Initiative. Of the 100 unsolved, racially motivated murders she's been charged with investigating, none has been more promising or frustrating than Louis Allen's.
Somebody knows something. Some husband came home with bloody clothing. Someone got drunk in a bar and said what he was doing last night. Someone knows something.
But in the early 1960s, people in and around Liberty knew to keep their mouths shut. A violent chapter of the Ku Klux Klan used cross-burnings, abductions, and murder to enforce the doctrine of white supremacy and to intimidate the black population, most of which lived in shacks with no electricity or plumbing and were not allowed to vote. Civil rights leaders like Robert Moses, who came south to help them register, were frequently the target of violence.
Liberty was not a place that I liked to go.
See, we got to understand on a deeper level, because they taught us in school, but they didn't really give us a true translation, that if your family is from the South, they intentionally kept them ignorant and not educated because the less they knew, the better it was, right? So we also got to keep that in account when we talking about our grandparents don't understand where we come from, like they were conditioned.
Why?
Because it was a place where you weren't safe if you were doing voter registration work.
It was in Liberty that Moses met Louis Allen, a rough-hewn World War II veteran who walked proud and was not afraid to stand up for himself. He ran a small timber business, was one of the few blacks in Liberty to own his own land, and always wore a hat, which he considered a sign of self-respect. He was not the type to seek out trouble. Robert Moses says it found him.
He was at the wrong place at the wrong time. He saw something that happened, and he was deeply disturbed and affected by that. And so he had a basic life decision to make.
On September 25th, 1961, Allen was walking past this old cotton gin when he saw something that likely got him killed.
Louis Allen witnessed a powerful state legislator by the name of E.H. Hurst shoot and kill an unarmed black man named Herbert Lee. Allen told his friends and family that he and other eyewitnesses had been pressured into lying about the shooting, into saying that it was self-defense. Later, Allen decided that he needed to tell the truth.
One of the people Louis Allen told it to was Julian Bond, who is trying to register black voters in Mississippi for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He would later become a legendary civil rights leader.
This was not a self-defense action by the state representative. This was out-and-out murder. That's all it was. But Louis Allen agreed to lie about that.
Why do you think he lied?
He lied because he was in fear of his life. If he had implicated a powerful white man in a murder of a black man, then he was risking his life.
Did you encourage him to tell the truth?
I tried to encourage him to tell the truth, but, it was like saying, why don't you volunteer to be killed?
But Allen's wife would later testify that his conscience was clipping him, and he decided to tell FBI agents and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights what really happened at the cotton gin. This document from FBI files says Allen changed his story and expressed fear that he might be killed. He asked for protection, but none was provided. Almost immediately, word began circulating in Liberty that Louis Allen was prepared to change his testimony.
He was threatened as a result of the fact that he was going to change his statement and that he did change his statement.
And the FBI was notified of those threats?
Yes.
Did the FBI do anything?
Yes, we referred that to local law enforcement authorities.
It's certainly possible to conclude the local law enforcement people were the ones behind the threats.
There is a theory out there that speaks to that. Yeah.
You hear this bitch? She said that did the FBI do something? Yes. We told the local law enforcement. It was the sheriff who shot the nigga.
Yes.
In fact, it's been the prevailing theory for some time, although the FBI cannot officially confirm it. There is a 1961 reference in the FBI file to a report that Allen was to be killed and the local sheriff was involved in the plot to kill him. And we found this 1962 letter from Robert Moses to Assistant Attorney General John Doerr alleging the same thing. They're after him in Emmett County, it says, and makes reference to a plot by the sheriff and 7 other men.
He was afraid of the sheriff's department.
I think he was, yes.
And I think he was afraid of the Klan.
Hey, it's Sep from Unison.
Hold up. See, that's bullshit. Watch, I'm gonna go back because I want to show you her face when they asked her about the Klan. The eyes never lie. Look.
To a plot by the sheriff and 7 other men. He was afraid of the sheriff's department.
I think he was, yes.
And I think he was afraid of the Klan. Although they seem to be sort of the same thing in Liberty at this time.
I'm not sure I can say that.
I'm not sure I can say that. Bullshit.
Julian Bond was less circumspect. The law enforcement, you suspected they were members. If you wanted to be a mayor, a city councilman, a county commissioner, the sheriff, if you wanted to be in the legislature, you had to have some connection with the Klan.
And in the Emmett County Sheriff's Department, the person with the best connection was Deputy Sheriff Daniel Jones. His father was the exalted Cyclops of the local Klan, and Jones himself, according to this FBI document we found, was suspected of being a Klan member. Jones, who's alive and still resides in Liberty, was recently visited by FBI agents who wanted him to take a lie detector test. What was he like?
Well, mean.
Hank Allen was 17 years old when his father was killed, and he remembers Daniel Jones as his main tormentor. He says he watched Jones harass and repeatedly arrest his father on trumped-up charges, and one night beat him outside their home.
And he had handcuffed him, told him he was under arrest. So Dad asked for his hat. He told Dad, no, you can't go get your hat. Daddy said, well, Dad, my son is on the porch. Can he bring me my hat? He drawed back. He took a flashlight, and he struck my dad and broke his jawbone, handcuffed.
When he got out of jail, Louis Allen did something that was unheard of for a black man in Mississippi. He went to the FBI and lodged a complaint against Deputy Sheriff Jones and testified before a federal grand jury. The case was thrown out, and the situation in Liberty continued to deteriorate.
They stopped selling Daddy gas in the town. They stopped buying his logs. They just more or less just tried to blackball him.
It got to the point, the harassment and just him not being able to survive in Liberty, that he decided to leave and to go work in another state. And it's the night before he is due to leave that he is killed.
Louis Allen was ambushed here on a cold...
And it's the night before he was getting ready to leave that he was killed. The FBI got him killed, if you really pay attention.
Cold night in January 1964, after getting out of his truck to open the cattle gate that led to his property. His son Hank was the one who found him.
I didn't know why he would park the truck in the middle of the driveway and leave it like that. And I climbed up in the truck. The headlights was real dim. And when I went to step down out the truck, I stepped on something. And that's when I stepped on my daddy's hand. He was lying up under the truck.
He was killed with 2 blasts of deer shot to the head. The investigating officer was none other than the newly elected sheriff, Daniel Jones, who Hank said made it clear to the family why his father had been murdered.
He told my mom that if Louis had just shut his mouth, that he wouldn't be laying there on the ground. He wouldn't be dead.
You think Sheriff Jones did it?
Yes, indeed. By all means. If he didn't do it, he was the entrepreneur of it.
Jones told the newspapers he was unable to find a single clue. How would you characterize the investigation that Sheriff Jones conducted?
He did not develop any fingerprints, any physical evidence, and he never developed any suspects.
Not a great investigation.
Probably could have done more.
So for people that might have just came in, so the sheriff who killed this nigga also did the investigation for his murder. And he said he didn't find one clue. You know what I'm saying? Not one.
Could have done more.
In fact, it's not clear that anyone investigated Louis Allen's murder until 1994, when Plater Robinson, an historian at the Southern Institute at Tulane University, began digging into it.
From day one in Liberty, people told me that Daniel Jones and a colored man killed Louis Allen.
Robinson has spent 17 years combing through archives and tracking down people to interview. One of them was an elderly preacher named Alfred Knox. Knox told Robinson in a 1998 tape-recorded conversation that his son-in-law, Archie Weatherspoon, was with Sheriff Daniel Jones when Allen was murdered.
My son-in-law went with him.
To kill Louis Allen?
To kill Louis Allen. He didn't know where he was going until he got in the car. And he said, Will you pull the trigger? Will you shoot him? I said, no, I ain't gonna do it. That's what my son-in-law said. I ain't gonna shoot him. You come out here to kill him, you get it. So he killed him.
Both Knox and his son-in-law took their stories to the grave, but Plater Robinson says the answer to who killed Louis Allen can still be found in Liberty.
A lot of people are dead, but there's still a number of significant people still alive.
Like who, besides Sheriff Jones?
Well, Charles Ravencraft, he lives down the road. He's quite healthy.
Well, Charles Ravencraft, he lives down the road. He's quite healthy. He's arrogant as shit.
We found Charles Ravencraft at the Liberty drugstore, presiding over a coffee clutch of old-timers, some of whom...
But even in, like they say, even in his arrogance, you accidentally give us information to go find shit.
...were around when Louis Allen was murdered.
People in this area that just don't do much talking.
For years, Ravencraft was Sergeant-at-Arms of the Mississippi legislature, and at the time of Louis Allen's murder, Vice President of the Americans for the Preservation of the White Race and Liberty, a front group for the Ku Klux Klan.
Was it around, Charles? What is that?
Klan.
Sure. In here.
Weren't you guys in it?
They wouldn't have been a Klan if you don't tell everybody what your business was.
Ravencraft indicated that he hadn't lost much sleep over Louis Allen's murder and told us he had no idea who killed him.
No, I don't. He lived a lot longer than I thought.
See this nigga face? See the eyes is the doorway to the soul.
Ravencraft indicated Ravencraft was Sergeant-at-Arms of the Mississippi legislature, and at the time of Louis Allen's murder, Vice President of the Americans for the Preservation of the White Race and Liberty, a front group for the Ku Klux Klan.
We out here arguing with each other, fighting and shit. And they got multiple organizations where they organize, and that's why when shit go left, they ready to come out here and start killing niggas, and we out here fighting each other. All these different organizations. And I always ask people, remember we went to school with all our friends that was like white? What happened to them? After we got a certain age, they disappeared.
Klan.
Was it around, Charles? What is that?
Klan.
Sure. In here.
Weren't you guys in it?
They wouldn't have been a Klan if you don't tell everybody what your business was.
Ravencraft indicated that he hadn't lost much sleep over Louis Allen's murder and told us he had no idea who killed him.
No, I don't.
See this nigga eyes. As soon as he said, no, I don't, his eyes.
Allen's murder and told us he had no idea who killed him.
No, I don't. He lived a lot longer than I thought he would live.
He lived a lot longer than I thought he would live. The son of a bitch lived a lot longer than I thought he should live. I would have put a bullet in his goddamn forehead. Fucking nigga. That's the mentality. I'm just real enough to show you, like, the difference between me and a lot of niggas is I know how they feel about me. You know what I mean? That's the difference. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, I'm not saying all, but I ain't got time because the majority, at the end of the day, the ones that's not, they not going to stand up. And if they ain't willing to pick up a gun and go kill them, in reality, to stop this shit, it's pointless.
I don't think that civil rights had anything to do with it.
Winborn Sullivan wasn't around when Louis Allen was killed, but he ran the Liberty drugstore for 36 years.
I think there are people who know what happened and who did it, but they're not willing to talk about it, and they won't talk about it. You'll never find out.
They told us they don't see much of former Sheriff Daniel Jones these days. He spends most of his time on his property just off the state highway. We decided to approach him with our cameras concealed, on the off chance he might give something up. After waiting for a half an hour on the porch, he rolled up in an all-terrain vehicle with his wife.
Yo, I'm gonna tell you something else I learned. I've noticed doing a lot of history that it seems like all of the people that get elected in high offices and shit, they did some real foul shit to get the position. Like it's something you gotta do.
We're from 60 Minutes in New York. We're down here working on a story on an old case of yours and was wondering if you'd have some time to talk to us about it.
No, sir, I don't believe so.
You don't think so?
No, sir.
The Louis Allen case?
Yeah, I know.
He ain't even, listen, he said, I'm here to talk to you about an old case. Then he was like, no, sir, You know what I'm saying? He said, I'm talking about Byron. He said, I know what you're talking about. He didn't even tell him what case. Technically, he was already knew. He said, I already know. Go back. I'm showing you that the brain, as you get older, I'm telling you, look.
Talk to us about it.
No, sir, I don't believe so.
You don't think so?
No, sir.
The Louis Allen case?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He was polite and cordial, said he didn't want to talk, but he kept on talking.
There was some bad blood between you and Louis, right?
It was not no bad blood between them. Apparently, I'm talking more than I need to, but the truth sometimes has a way of slipping out if you try to keep it covered up.
Mm-hmm. Were you in the Klan?
I won't answer that one. I'll take the fifth on that.
Jones confirmed that the FBI...
He said sometimes the truth has a way of slipping out when you try to cover it up. The nigga just admitted to guilt. The brain is a crazy organism when you understand it. The way guilt resonates in the mind and in the spirit is different.
I had already been there asking some of the same questions.
I told you I don't care to discuss it anymore, and you just keep coming to your educated approach.
No, it's not my educated approach. Look, you haven't told me to get off your property. I just asked me one last question.
Okay, be sure it's the last one.
Can you look me in the eye and say you weren't involved in it?
No, sir, I wasn't involved in it.
Well, you know, Sheriff, you could clear this up with a lie detector test.
Well, it ain't gonna get cleared up.
The theory.
Yo, his voice cracked and everything in his bones said no. Listen to this shit.
Well, you know, Sheriff, you could clear this up with a lie detector test.
Well, it ain't gonna get cleared up.
The theory that Sheriff Jones killed Louis Allen has been in the public domain for quite some time. The FBI would be remiss in our duties if we did not pursue that theory.
And it's still just a theory, a circumstantial case based on motive, suspicions, hearsay, and the words of dead people. There's no forensic evidence, no murder weapon, no eyewitnesses, and only one FBI agent working the case part-time.
My name is Cynthia Deedle.
At a town hall meeting in nearby Baton Rouge, Deedle tried to shake out some new leads and enlist journalists, activists, and students to help the FBI solve the murder.
See, y'all gotta forgive me. Sometimes you gotta laugh about some of this shit because it's so much shit that sometimes you gotta learn to smile about it and know how to digest it and look at their ignorance as humor.
But there were some in the audience who still mistrust the FBI and think the cold case initiative is little more than public relations.
There's been nothing did. There has been not one arrest. There's been all kind of investigations made. And I hate to say things like this because the FBI is the only help I got.
Should the FBI...
Now, at the beginning, see, they got a way of saying things on TV that kind of go over niggas' heads, right? And he was like... Some of the people felt like the FBI only did this for public relations. Now, everybody outside our community knows what public relations is. Because there's something that we don't talk about in our family, keep politics and shit out of the conversations they teach us, right? But what they were meaning by that is the only reason why the FBI was doing this was to get a better relationship with the public. Not really to solve shit, but just to make the public feel like you can trust me. You know what I'm saying? So that's the key with when I'm telling y'all when they say certain things like public relations. They only did it for the reason to make the black community feel like, oh, you can trust me.
FBI be doing more if they're...
Of course we should be doing more. Thank God for these people who are doing it. But we can't turn...
And for everybody who watch me every day, I say black because understand I speak in adept. Most of the world doesn't understand if I say more, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm trying to change their religion. So I'm just speaking in the terms that people understand on average.
Law enforcement over to journalists. We can't turn it over to academics.
Yeah, I seen
we
the
can't
13.
depend on some guy at Tulane to tell us who's killing people in Mississippi. Come on.
Why are you relying on reporters and...
Now, of course, they didn't do shit. So I hope y'all wasn't expecting to get a solved case. You know what I'm saying? That's the smile of America, to make America great again. You know what I'm saying? To me, I can see it in a person's facial gestures, if they sincere or not. But now I gotta... Let's jump. Let's keep it going.
And in this particular lecture...
Hold on, man. I'm going to let y'all pick. I was looking for this conversation of Admiral Byrd, this is who they made Captain America after. Well, some of it. And he was an explorer, a scientist, and he went to Antarctica, and he seen another continent, and he seen other shit like woolly mammoths, and he said he met another extraterrestrial race. He came back to the government and dealt with some shit. You know what I'm saying? The problem was I couldn't really find a clear one. Like, I had found it back in the day, so I will bring that to y'all soon. But I want to make sure I got the right one.
I'm gonna cover a number of different things and a lot of.
But this is some law shit. They always give y'all a piece of history and law.
This to some people may seem like way out initially, you know, which it seemed to me, but I tried to gather as much facts as possible outside of the Moors to prove what we're saying. You know, a lot of times people say, well, it's y'all Moors saying this, but show me something else that's saying what y'all saying, that proves what y'all saying. So I tried to gather as much as possible, and I have a lot of information here to share. I tried to organize it as best as possible because a lot of information, and I just tried to put it in the best way so that you could be able to grasp it. I'm gonna start off speaking about a man by the name of Horace Greeley. And he was part of a worldwide conspiracy to conceal the information that I'm about to speak on today. And there's a definite reason why this information was concealed. Horace Greeley was the founder and editor of a paper called the New York Tribune, which was located in New York City. This newspaper was a national newspaper as well as international, and it had a profound effect on the consciousness of European people. At the time when this was put together, you know, sometimes we think that Europeans, that, you know, they've been a world power, you know, going way back to so-called Greeks and Romans time, all that's fictional. All that's fictional. They just got themselves together as recently as 1854 to 1865. This is when they finally got themselves together to govern the planet on a global level, as recent as that date. And this is around the time of the Civil War. And at the end of the Civil War, they was finally able to put certain things together to bring themselves together. At the time, during Horace Greeley's time, they was in a similar condition that we are in now, in the sense that you had many different white organizations at that time. They were all striving for the uplifting of their people, but they had many different ideologies, many different groups of themselves, all striving and vying with each other, sometimes bitter conflict with each other, in order to achieve that goal, which is the upliftment of their people. The key role that Horace Greeley played was that his paper, his organ, the New York Tribune, was able to gather up all those people and give them a sense of a unified context or paradigm or direction that they was all able to unify themselves behind, regardless to their different ideological differences and so on and so forth. And this is what we're hoping that the Moorish paradigm or the Moorish Renaissance that's taking place now will be able to do. That it will serve as a paradigm that will be able to unify our people in regards to the different ideologies. You know, coming out from New York City, you know, and I sell books in Harlem on 125th Street, as well as in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn. And being in those two places, I've come in contact with every aspect of the so-called black movement or national or whatever you want to call it. I've come in contact with every aspect of it. Hebrew Israelites, every sect and division of Islam you could think of, black nationalists, all different types of groups, you know. And it seems like this may be able to unify us behind a certain paradigm. A paradigm is a certain perspective or outlook on the world. And this is what we're about to get into. We're about to have what's known as a paradigm shift. We're about to come into a new paradigm, a paradigm that will allow us to rise our people up and take our rightful place in history. Horace Greeley, prior to Horace Greeley's time, the European, or what we call the white man or whatever, he was known as the red man. And they called themselves red men. As a matter of fact, Horace Greeley was a member of a political party known as the Red Men's Whigs Party, which eventually he promoted to be changed to the Republican Party. The present-day Republican Party originally was called the Red Men's Whig Party. Horace Greeley, as well as Abraham Lincoln, were members of the Red Men's Whig Party. He suggested to them that they change their names to the Republican Party, and as opposed to call themselves red men, call themselves white men. And this was to set up this whole dynamic of white being pure and good and white being bad and inferior, this whole white supremacist mentality or paradigm that was being perfected at this time. Now, just to give you an idea of the power and of the influence of Horace Greeley, this was taken from a book called Horace Greeley in the New York Tribune during the Civil War. And it says in the introduction, it says, all contemporaries, friends, and foes alike testified that the Tribune exerted the greatest influence upon public opinion of any journal in the country during the period under discussion, which was the Civil War period. It goes on to say that the paper furnished the basis of a power national in scope and at times enabled the editor to mold public sentiment more effectively than even the president. Horace Greeley in that paper, the New York Tribune, actually had more influence over the mindset of European people on an international scale than even the President of the United States. Karl Marx was just the London correspondent of the New York Tribune. This was an international thing that took place here. All right, it also says that it would have been difficult to convince the great mass of rural subscribers from western New York to Iowa that the old white-coated philosopher, Horace Greeley, did not pen every line in their political Bible. Herein lies the crux of the Tribune power and influence. Horace Greeley was more than the editor of a great newspaper. He had acquired an enviable reputation as an expounder of political views and had actively sponsored the organization of the Republican Party on a national scale. So Horace Greeley had a great deal of influence. And he was like more or less, let's say, the point man that more or less gathered around him all these different people, covering all different various disciplines, everything from medicine to science to history. Just to give you an example, there's an article I have here called Archaeological Cover-Ups. This is an article that was taken from a magazine called Nexus Magazine. And this is a very good magazine. If you have a chance, get a hold of it. I believe Brother Emiola from the Black Mind Builders sells this particular magazine. And this particular article, Archaeological Cover-Ups, was dealing with the Smithsonian Institute, which was founded a little bit prior or during Horace Greeley times around in 1829. And it starts off, it says, most of us are familiar with the last scene in the popular Indiana Jones archaeological adventure film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, in which an important historical artifact, the Ark of the Covenant from the temple in Jerusalem, is locked in a crate and put in a giant warehouse, never to be seen again. I'm sure you all remember that part at the end where they shipped it in. They had all these different boxes marked top secret. It goes on to say, the Smithsonian Institute is an independent federal agency. Sounds familiar? IRS, Federal Reserve, so on. An independent federal agency has been actively suppressing some of the most interesting and important archaeological discoveries made in America. Now, what they were covering up was our history in this hemisphere. At this time, this is the time when they concocted this myth that we were all brought over here on slave ships from Africa to be their slaves. This is one of the biggest lies they ever put together. You're going to see the massive proportions of the lie that they have put forward. Yeah, there was some.
Some people argue it, but I used to always say, as proud as they are of slavery, why they don't have no boats and no museums, nothing.
They were brought here from Africa. But by far, the majority of us were already here. We had a civilization that went from Alaska all the way down to Chile, which they refer to as the ancient mound builders, the one who built the civilizations and built the mounds and pyramids all up and down this hemisphere. And you're going to see further what is the significance and the major role that we played in civilization here in this hemisphere. And the Smithsonian Institute was key in covering up these facts. And then they also mention it here about the Vatican and how they have an underground library in the Vatican. The walls 5 feet thick and 24-hour security. What they hiding down there? And he mentions how they have things down there that will conflict with the church's credibility or perhaps cast the official text in doubt. So they keep these things hidden. And it says, and it goes on to say, it says, when Thomas, the guy's name is Thomas, he was the director of the Eastern Mound Division of the Smithsonian Institute's Bureau of Ethnology. It says, when Thomas came to the Bureau of Ethnology, he was a pronounced believer in the existence of a race of mound builders distinct from the American Indians, the people who they're saying American with the long stringy hair and so on and so forth. He believed that there was a race of mound builders distinct from the American Indians. However, John Wesley Powell, the director of the Bureau of Ethnology, a very sympathetic man toward the American Indians, had lived with some of these ones who they call Indians, and he felt sorry for them. He felt that they say he felt sorry for them and they were treated unfairly and that they should get the credit for this. Now remember now, they were in the process of wiping these people out. So it's easy to give credit to a people that you know you're about to wipe out anyway. It goes on and says the Smithsonian began to promote the idea that Native Americans at that time being exterminated in the Indian Wars were descended from advanced civilizations and were worthy of respect and protection. They also began a program of suppressing any archaeological evidence that led credence to the school of thought known as diffusionism, a school which believes that throughout history there has been widespread dispersion of culture and civilization via contact by ship and major trade routes. Keep that in mind because remember, Moor means navigator. We were a maritime nation all over the planet. And keep that in mind because we're going to get deeper into that. This is the school of thought known as diffusionism believes that throughout history there was a widespread dispersion of culture and civilization via contact by ship and major trade routes. It goes on and says, but the Smithsonian opted for the opposite school, known as isolationism. Isolationism holds that most civilizations are isolated from each other and that there has been very little contact between them, especially those that are separated by bodies of water. And this intellectual war that started in 1880s, right around Horace Greeley time.
Right around the time of Wilmington massacre.
Now, this school of thought, isolationism, gives credence to their whole philosophy of us being so-called third world peoples and them being so-called first world peoples. They're saying this is the first time the world has been unified as what's known as the global village, or unified in economy and trade and so on and so forth. Wrong. There's been two civilizations prior to that in which it was unified by the Moors. First the ancient Moabites or Moabites, and then the Moors. It goes on to say, when the contents of many ancient mounds and pyramids of the Midwest were examined, it was shown that the history of the Mississippi River valleys was that of an ancient and sophisticated culture that had been in contact with Europe and other areas. Not only that, the contents of many mounds revealed burials of huge men, sometimes 7 or 8 feet tall, in full armor with swords and sometimes huge treasures. All this was being found by the Smithsonian.
So you gotta understand, in a lot of the holy books, they talk about giants. They just never told you which people were the giants. So y'all think LeBron and KD and them is by chance, or they just... I'm gonna leave that to y'all.
Gets back into the Bible, they talk about these different giants and Nephilim and so on and so forth. And it goes on and says, for instance, when Spiro Mound in Oklahoma was excavated in the 1930s, a tall man in full armor was discovered along with a pot of thousands of pearls and other artifacts. The largest such treasure so far documented. We have many more treasures here. The elders taught us that the Moors did more building underground than we did above ground here. And you see what we did build above ground, or what's left. What the Dominicans and Franciscan priests did not destroy and vandalize and loot and burn and pillage. And underground, they are aware of the vast underground tunnel networks that we have built underneath this country, where you was able to travel from New York City to California underground without having come above ground once.
That's called the Underground Railroad.
And their military has taken over some of these underground facilities, but they can go over so far deep. And they know through different infrared and satellite pictures and so on and so forth, they know that there's other things deeper down that they can't get to. And when conquistadors came, they found whole villages and cities empty with people. They didn't know where they went. Oh yeah. Continuing on, it says, he was told by former employees that the Smithsonian employee was dismissed for defending the view of diffusionism. And it said the Smithsonian at one time had actually taken a barge full of unusual artifacts out into the Atlantic Ocean and dumped it into the ocean. This is what they was doing with some of the things that they found. And they mentions here about stone coffins that was discovered in 1892 in Alabama, which were then sent to the Smithsonian Institute and then lost, according to the newsletter. And then going further down, it says, the head curator says, we have not been able to find the specimens in our collections, though records show that they were received. And it says, the Alaskan mound, they found a mound up in Alaska, and it says the Alaskan mound was in fact a graveyard of gigantic human remains consisting of crania and long leg bones. The crania measured from 22 to 24 inches from base to crown. Since an adult normally measures about 8 inches from back to front, such a large cranium would imply immense size for a normally proportioned human. In fact, the habit of flattening the skull of an infant and forcing it to grow in an elongated shape was a practice used by ancient Peruvians, Mayans,
I told y'all. You get what I'm saying? So think about it. Like, if the body grows, the brain needs to grow too. All of the pharaoh tombs got this elongated skull, and they left the tools to do it with. So it's not like it's not there to be seen. But I believe that the man that we don't mature because our brain doesn't have the proper capacity to continue its development.
There's Egyptians, you see some of the Egyptian pictures where they have the long hair, even in the South. You know, I heard stories where they used to actually shape the baby's head with their hands. You know, all this is directly related to us. Also, it said that they found statues ranging from less than an inch to 6 feet. Now, check this out. Depicting reptiles or dinosaurs, some of them in active association with humans, showing us contemporary with dinosaurs in this hemisphere. And we want to know who was the first people, who's the true Native Americans. There's nobody here standing on this part of this hemisphere that could trace their roots back here further than us. Contemporary with dinosaurs. It goes on to say they also found portrayals of Bigfoot and aquatic monster-like creatures, weird human-animal mixtures. This gets into another lesson that's part of the course where we get into Yakub and how we kind of different types of experimentation in the Pyramid University of Yucatan, Mexico, where they have found all kinds of remnants and artifacts showing all kinds of crosses.
So they saying that Yakub, aka Jacob, which the pyramid in Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun, was a college. You can find this out in many references. That Jacob, aka Yakub, was doing experiments in what we call Mexico, the Pyramid of the Sun.
We think genetic engineering and gene splicing, in vitro fertilization, we think these are new things. Our ancestors was mastering these things long time ago in the Pyramid University. This is how we made what we call the white race. By our scientists. Ain't no natural selection or none of that made no white race because they was up in the North Pole. What about the Eskimos? Continuing on, right?
You heard he called them the Eskimos. They call them the Eskimo. But mo means more.
It's a lot of information. We're going to try and cover as much of this as possible.
And they've been up there for hundreds of years, and they still black as hell.
Now check this out. It says, historian and linguist Carl Hart, editor of World Explorer, then obtained a hiker's map of the Grand Canyon from a bookstore in Chicago. Pouring over the map, we were amazed to see that much of the area on the north side of the canyon has Egyptian names. The area around 94 Mile Creek and Trinity Creek had areas or with names like Tower of Set, Tower of Ra, Horus Temple, Osiris Temple, Isis Temple. In the Haunted Canyon area were such names as Cheops Pyramid, the Buddha Cloister, Buddha Temple, Manu Temple, and Shiva Temple. All this was found in the Grand Canyon, and they have closed those sections off because they said it's too dangerous. All this is sitting right there to this day.
It's either a paradise over there or some ancient people that live over there. And I told people the Grand Canyon, if you really look at it, it looks like old. The structures are so old. They're older than every structure on Earth. So that's why, because nature doesn't make any round-shaped object. It's just not, it doesn't work like that.
And this is another article from the same magazine that deals with exploration. This is from a front page from the Phoenix Gazette from the 5th of April, 1909. And the title says, Explorations in Grand Canyon, Mysteries of Immense Rich Cavern Being Brought to Light. And it talks about how, it says, Mr. Kincaid found like a cavern, like a crypt, with human heads, solid rock carved by human hands, and tablets and all kinds of things he found in there. And he had to go nearly a mile underground, about 1,480 feet below the surface. The long main passage has been delved into to find another mammoth chamber from which radiate scores of passageways like spokes on a wheel. Up in New York, where you got these different, you got all kinds of old names like Day Street, DEY, Moore Street, all in the same area, right by Wall Street. Right in the Wall Street area where they found the ancestral burial grounds, you got a Moore Street and a Day Street, DEY. And the elders told us there were 5 groups of Moors here. The Bays, the Days, the Owls, the Eels, and the Alis.
Malcolm's name was El Malik Shabazz.
And that gets into the 5 civilized tribes, as well as the 5 pairs of sons of Poseidon who governed Atlantis. And we're going to get into that connection also with Atlantis. There was an Indian legend dealing with the Hopi Indians. The original Hopis were our ancestors as well. And it says that in connection with the story, it is notable that among the Hopi Indians, the tradition is told that their ancestors once lived in the underworld in the Grand Canyon. A dissension arose between the good and the bad, the people of the one heart and the people of the 2 hearts. It sound like the Boulay. They have 2 hearts, or it sound like some of those Uncle Tom Negroes who have 2 hearts. You know what I'm saying? They want to be down with the white man, but they want to be down with us, 2 hearts. And it says that Macheto was their chief, counseled the good ones with the 1 heart to leave the underworld, the underground city, but there was no way out. The chief then caused a tree to grow up and pierce the roof of the underworld, and the people of 1 heart climbed out. They tarried by the Red River, which is in Colorado, and grew grain and corn. They sent out a message to the temple of the sun, asking the blessings of peace, goodwill, and rain for the people of 1 heart. The messenger never returned. But today at the Hopi villages at sundown can be seen the old men of the tribe on the housetops gazing towards the sun, looking for the messenger. When he returns their lands and ancient dwelling places will be restored to them. We are those messengers with the feds. We the ones they're looking for. And all those lands will be returned to us. All right? Now, in connection, and I found a book. Now, I kept telling myself, this whole thing, now this is a whole nother deep area that has to be further researched and looked into. Something bothered me about this whole thing about Greeks and Romans and these Europeans going way back to 500 BC. I said, something don't sound right here. I had a theory. Something told me that somewhere around Hans Greeley's time is that they talk about this Renaissance and all this. Renaissance, the rebirth of classical culture, Greek and Roman culture, whatever. That wasn't no rebirth of no Greek. That was the birth of it for them. They concocted this thing. At that time, students of the Moors, they were students of the Moors. And they were going around, their artists were going around making sculptures and stuff, saying that these were the ancient Greeks. A lot of these sculptures had heads missing that they replaced. Now I said, there gotta be a book, there gotta be something that will give me some hints. Remember now, because all this information at Hans Greeley's time was kept out of the institutions of higher learning. But you will find it scattered here and there. You will find a sentence here, a paragraph here, a page here. It's scattered. You got to be almost like a detective, but you got to have the context. You got to have the paradigm first to know what you're even looking at. Once you get this particular context, this particular paradigm, a lot of things that you already know will begin to make a lot more sense.
Meaning that, like, when I talked to the kids about it when they was a little younger, I was a little eerie if it was a little too early. But I told them when they was a little younger, 7, 5, stuff like that, but really explained to them history. And what ended up happening, because I changed their paradigm, when they went to school this year, they came home and they was like, look at what's in this book. And it was talking about how the Moors was in America. Now, they was like, we would have known nothing about it because it's not like the school told us who the Moors were. Because they would tell you and show you pictures of like an Arab, you know what I'm saying? So if you change the paradigm, if you understand the true order of history and where things go when you read things, even when they lie to you, you still see the true content.
In this particular context. And I said, there gotta be a book where I can find that, I can uncover, because something just don't sound right. Then I came across something where Erasmus from the so-called Renaissance period was writing letters to other students under the pen name of Cicero. I said, hold up. And then you hear about, for instance, Francis Bacon was one who they call Shakespeare. And he had a literary group, or a secret society, a secret literary group, who were putting out all kinds of works on more science under the pen name of Shakespeare. So I said, what's going on here? Something don't seem right. You got to get the feel for this thing. Now, one day, this is where the ancestors come in, because once you tune in with the ancestors, they will guide you to certain things. The ancestors will constantly, that whole summer, they were guiding me to all kinds of books, and at that time I was teaching the course, and I have some of the packets here. I have about 10 of them, 5 of them already sold. And I was teaching the course at that time, and I was constantly, each week, they were just sending me, and I would just walk to a shelf, bam, pick up a book, and boom, the jewels would be in there. And I wasn't even using the catalog at a certain point. I was just walking in and just pulling stuff out. And I would get to sections like, I would be teaching on a topic like constitutional law, and there would be a whole section on that subject. And I say, man, how am I gonna get the best book for the class or whatever, And I would go right to a particular book, and it will be exactly the book that sort of like encompasses all the other ones. And it will be exactly the right one. So this is very important that we tune in with the ancestors, because they will lead us and guide us certain things that we need to know at this time. So one day I just got an urge to go to this bookstore, Barnes & Noble up in Yonkers. And when I went there, I seen 2 nuns. And it just hit my mind, because somebody had told, one of the elders said that C.M. Bay had got a lot of this information. C.M. Bay, who gave us a lot of this information, got it from a Catholic priest who had this stuff hid. So I thought about that when I seen them. I walked a little bit further, and there it was, the book I was looking for, a big gigantic book, and on the top of the book it says fake. And it talks about all the fakes, artifacts that were being faked by these Europeans. And this is one excerpt from it, and it says the 19th century, the great age of faking. And this is right around the time of Horace Greeley. And it says the 19th century saw a fundamental shift in the relationship of Western culture to the past. And it says a man by the name of Horace Walpole, sounds almost familiar, Horace Greeley, Horace Walpole and his circle had discovered the romance of the past, even in objects surviving from the period of barbarism between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. Their discovery arriving on the eve of the Industrial Revolution, a period in which spread of affluence was combined with the increasing desire to escape from the present, because they know they didn't have no history at that present time, produced an explosion in collecting. From classical antiquities and old master paintings, the mania spread to encompass the chivalric glamour of the Middle Ages, the sculpture and decorative arts of the Renaissance, 18th century ceramics, 17th century metalwork, and even towards the end of the century. So in other words, at this time, they was dealing with all this that they have spaced out over hundreds of years, the Renaissance. They was dealing with all this at this time, and this is the time when they was concocting this whole thing, this whole false history. And it says the collective mania created a paradise for dishonest dealers. As each new craze took a sudden imbalance between supply and demand, create the perfect opportunity for such people to peddle their fakes before a pool of expertise had been created. It says craftsmen and some artists were themselves bemused and sometimes embittered by the fact that this old work has suddenly replaced them. So what they did to maintain a living, they started making fakes of so-called old stuff because the stuff they was making contemporary, it wasn't selling. And they see it was such a craze for so-called antiquities that they began faking these things. All right? So that just will make you understand sometime when you see, they talk about this Greek and this Roman from 500 BC, all that's fictional. And what they did, Horace Greeley time is also they shifted time. They added 580 years to our calendar. According to our calendar, this is the year 1414. They added 580 years to throw you off. So things that for instance.
So if you wonder why a lot of people ask me, like, can you explain to me why the timeline zero's in the middle and then ancient history goes to the left and then modern day history goes to the right, but in the middle is because they want to confuse you. That fucking chart makes no sense, but it also does to some sense to tell you that time is all equivalent to on the same line. But it makes no sense, but it confuses you because they fucked up the calendar.
Let me get into this right here. This is another book. And see, there's certain things, being up in New York, I've seen Afrocentricity come, reach its peak, but it has not been able to answer the problems of our people. Brothers and sisters still out there killing each other off. They'll come up to you with a big Africa in the chest and kill you. They don't care. So it has not been able to meet or solve the problems of our people. And like New York was the center of Afrocentric. I was out there with the books, I seen the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? But there were certain limiting factors within it. For one, Afrocentricity means, when you say Afrocentric or centered, that means you're just centering on Africa. And you're excluding a lot of other things. There were certain books, certain things that you wouldn't look into. For instance, I got this information from a book by a guy named Barry Feld. He's a Harvard professor. And he was talking about a lot about Leif Erikson and the Vikings and all that stuff like that. So you in Africa, you see someone on the Vikings, I don't know about that. That ain't got nothing to do with me. That's some white people. Those ones who they're calling Vikings and Danes were Moorish navigators. And in this book, that, you know, if you was of the mindset you wouldn't even look into, he has a map right here, just to start with this map, and he has listed Libyans. This is North America, and this is a Harvard professor. Libyans, Norse, Greek, Cretans, Iberians, Jews, Celts, all that here in North America. And he talks about the Iroquois Confederacy, for instance. He said the Iroquois are believed to have reached North America after most of these settlers had been made, possibly from South America around 1200 AD, passing up the Mississippi to drive an enclave into the Algonquin area. And the Iroquois, the Confederacy, was a very important branch of our people because they had a model of a federal government that the Europeans patterned themselves after. George Washington Benjamin Franklin. There's a book called Indian Givers that talks about that. There's also another book called The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall. All right, and I'm just going to quote some things that was in this book that relates to us. Just give me a moment to get to the particular pages that I want. He had a chapter in here called Arabs Before Islam. Now, this is very important because this shows you, something struck me as strange also. I said, if the Moors just came about in 711 AD and invaded Spain and stuff like that, who were the people that the Romans were referred to as Moors? If the Romans and the Greeks were before Islam, Muhammad and Arabs and all that stuff like that, then how were the Greeks and Romans referring to people contemporary with themselves as Moors? And I said, something's not clicking here, something's not right. Having this paradigm, how they shifted history, you see what I'm saying? You would look, and it seems to me, and more research, like I said, more research has to be done. When they were referring to Carthage, they were referring to the Moors. And Rome was those so-called Franciscans that we were fighting against. You see? And there's a space there of about 800 years. So I said, wait, how does that space 800 years get in there, right? Then I came across something else by another European scholar by the name of Emanuel Velikovsky. I'm sure some of you may have heard of Velikovsky. He was looked down upon by all his peers at that time. And now they're coming around to agree with what he's saying. He wrote a book called Ramses II in His Times. And in it, he dropped some major bombs. He proved how Ramses II and Nebuchadnezzar, who according to most Orthodox history is separated by about 800 years, how they were contemporary, how they were at the exact same time, and how when they refer to the Hittite Empire, the Hittites, and Syria and so on and so forth, they call it the forgotten or mysterious empire. That wasn't no forgotten mysterious. That was the Chaldean Empire. So there was a space.
And where did the Bible say Moses was from? Chaldea. See, every conversation will always give you information on other things. Knowledge is always coming back and forth.
Somewhere along the line, 800 years was added. Now, if you factor that into equation, that will bring Carthage right up to 711 AD with the Moors. The 800-year difference. See, they were playing. The European was a master. What he was doing during this period of time is that he was grafting a history. When Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that he was given 6,000 years to rule the earth, he didn't rule this earth for 6,000 years. He was given dominion or jurisdiction over 6,000 years worth of history. When you look in the books, all his history books start off with historical times as 4,000 BC, which up to now would be 6,000 years. When you look in the King James Version of the Bible, it starts off 4004 BC. So what he did was manipulate and graft and change up 6,000 years worth of history. The grafting process, when you take a nectarine orange, navel orange that don't have no seeds in it, it's not natural. It cannot perpetuate itself. There's no seed for you to plant. So what they have to do is take a branch, slice it diagonally, take a regular tree, a real orange tree with seeds and everything, cut one of its branches diagonally, and sew it on or tie it onto it, and it will grow and sustain itself off the roots of that original tree. This is the grafting process. This is what these Europeans did. They didn't have no history, just like the orange with no seeds. So they had to graft themselves onto already existing histories to give themselves a semblance of antiquity. They had no history.
See, I fuck with him because he ain't gonna fuck around with you. Excuse my language, but I just love his approach.
So they graft themselves. The original people who inhabited the region that they refer to as Greek was us, dealing with the Mycenaean and Minoan Moors, who were navigators. The ones who inhabited the region that they refer to as Rome were the Etruscans, who were us. You see? So they had to concoct this false history for them to rise to be in the place of power where they're at right now. They ran into a problem. They found some tablets or whatever that had ancient Libyan or Numidian script. And they never could interpret these things. Then one day, they found out that Arabic was the key to it. But that threw them, they said, wait, this is something 200-something BC. The Arabs didn't come till later on to 700. How was Arabic dealing with that? You see? And this was the key to unlocking these particular scripts, and so they could interpret it, which means that, now they try to say that there was Arabs in North Africa or these different places before Islam. No, there wasn't Arabs. These languages all part. We used many different languages. Sheehan Bay said that Latin was one of our ancient languages. We always associate Latin with European people, or what they call the Indo-European languages. Those are our ancient languages, going into ancient Sanskrit and so on and so forth. We had different languages for different purposes. Latin was a legal, scientific language, and Arabic was a more poetic, dealing with more subtle, conveying more subtle ideas and concepts. The so-called adobe houses that you see in Mexico, the Pueblo Indian, you see the exact same thing in North Africa. The exact same type of houses constructed the exact same way. And it makes sense, because like I said, if you join those two parts together, what they call Libya, all that was all connected with America. It was all one thing. So naturally, you're going to have the same type of houses, the same type of climate, everything. And even the doggone.
So let me tell you something I realized the other day. So you know when we look at a map on the prime meridian with the lines, they didn't really explain it to us completely, right? But let's say you live in Africa and you live on the 78th parallel, for example. If you just travel across that parallel to another continent, you're going to still get the same weather. So that's how they would know if that land was favorable to what they was used to.
Same type of thing, built in the side of the cliff, so on and so forth. The same thing, it's all one knowledge.
And the Dogon mythology and the entire thing is identical to the Hopi Indians. If you look at the pictures of the Hopi Indians and look at the Dogon, it's identical.
Same people, same technology.
We found on Washita Street here at North Highland in Atlanta.
Look at that nigga Bobby Hemmett.
On Washita Street, right off of North Highland.
You'll be surprised. This is, see, they would love for all you to go back to Africa and give up the wealth and birthrights to this land here. They had to perpetuate that myth. And because they would know that once you realize who you are, you will claim your birthrights to this land right here that belonged to your ancestors. Imagine how mad your ancestors must be to be buried in these grounds and see you chasing after another land other than the land that you were born on. And you wonder why you kept so much hell on so many things that happened to you. Because you run in the wrong direction. Not to say anything wrong with our brothers. Those are our brothers on the other side of the Atlantic. The Atlantic is like a big mirror. Cosmic mirror. What's on one side is on the other side. Ain't no difference. The elders told us that the original now is right here. Old man Mississippi. The Missouri is the blue and the Ohio is the white now. And where the two come together, they got a city there to this day called Cairo. And the whole region over there, as a matter of fact, to this day they call Little Egypt.
Remember, I told you that there's almost proof that the European took our ancient cities and changed the names of places and different continents. Like when they reconstructed history, they didn't just change the history, they changed the names of continents and cities and put this city over here on another continent to disassociate you from the truth, to show you how close you really are to the Holy Land.
The elders also said that in this hemisphere you have 7 cities. The 7 churches which are mentioned in the book of Revelations. The 7 churches which are in Asia. And those 7 cities go from St. Louis up to Chicago, over to Detroit, down into Cleveland, Ohio, over to Pittsburgh, over to Philadelphia, and up into Boston. And if you connect the dots of those 7 cities, they give you the constellation of Big Dipper, the Great Bear, which was referred to as Moena, which is also a name that we sometimes call Moorish sisters, Moena. And this is what that particular
Moana.
And it was said by the elders, whoever rules those 7 cities rule the planet. Those are 7 key cities. And until this day, one of the cities still has the same name in the book, City Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is in what? Pennsylvania, which is the Keystone State. And when you look in the book of Revelations under Philadelphia, it says that you have the keys of David. That what you open if no man shut up, and that what you shut up no man openeth. And in Philadelphia, what do you see there? They call it the city of brotherly love, because that's what we handed the keys to our federal government, to the European Masons. And you see the Liberty Bell. Because if you take this and turn it inside out, you got the gong, you got the Liberty Bell. And you wonder why it's cracked. When your liberty was taken from you, that's why it's cracked. You see? The Liberty Bell, and they also refer to the feds as the Liberty Cap. When you see that soft cap that they refer to as the Liberty Cap that's red, that's the feds. And then you look at the coat of arms. The elders also told us that what they called here in this hemisphere the Spanish Empire was in reality the Moorish Empire. And then you look at the coat of arms for El Salvador. You see the fez on top of it. You look at the coat of arms for Haiti. The fez is on it. Look at the coat of arms for Cuba. The fez is on it. Don't take my word for it. Go see it for yourself. The fez is sitting right up on there with a halo around it, just like the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. The same thing, because this is the pyramid, the all-seeing eye. This has a deep significance. You'll be surprised when you put this up on your head. Watch the responses that you get from Europeans, any people. I don't care where they come from. When we be standing there 125th Street, all the brothers, we be out there, and all you see is feathers out there. Germans, they all come by, they look, they're like, man, when the Moors, they awaken, they realize.
Hell yeah, let me tell you. The only hat you could wear in the courtroom that they cannot make you take off is the fez, because it was created for law as well. So the only hat you can legally wear in the courtroom is the fez.
That's who they are now. They come to, I don't care what country, Pakistan. The rulers in my country, they wear that. Africans come to me. Only big chiefs could wear that in my country. This was a sign of nobility of the rulers of this planet. Continuing on, the things we built, those 7 cities, the old man Mississippi, coming down, this region on our hands, doing this ancient Egypt. Headquarters, Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, the Memphite theology. Oh, that's right here.
The capital of Egypt was Memphis.
That's right here, the 5 Great Lakes. 5 lakes that were man-made by our ancestors that contain half of the world's fresh water supply. And that whole region over there is known as the breadbasket of the world. We fed the whole planet from there. And the elders also said that the original Mecca was Chicago, the center of all food, wheat, grain, and livestock distribution for the planet. And until this day, it's still that way. So we got to realize where we standing at right now and who we really are. When those Moors seen that we were falling from power, they took certain Europeans and initiated them and made them mystic Turks, chief protectors of the sacred shrines. They're not the owners. You had to be a master mason to be up in the federal government. And their duty was, when we seen that we were falling, we said, well, and they were coming to power, we said, let's initiate a group of them and put them there to protect our sacred shrine from the Catholics who would have destroyed everything up in here. And look at the Kennedy who was killed. What was he, a Catholic? Can't be no Catholic to be up in our sacred shrine, dealing with religious mystery. We deal with science of mathematics from 0 to 9, zodiac and geometry, minus religious superstition. We don't get into that. We deal with universal science. They're waiting for you to come and claim what's rightfully yours. We sitting back, I'm a Negro, I'm a color, I'm a black, I'm African. Hey, when you come to them with that, they say, look, go back and study some more, come back when you're ready. Because this was given to me by Moors. The title of this says Moor. If you don't come correct, you're not getting nothing. And the FBI, I got a picture of Hoover. Look at that. Let me just get this picture out here. So you can just see, I'm getting a little bit into the other lecture here, but I just want you to see this. If I can find it. And here you see a picture. Just give me a second. There's so much information, you know. I'm just trying, I just wish people could see. I did about 15,000, 20,000 hours of research over the last 12 years. And I've seen things, I'm just trying to get it to the people so everybody else can see what I've seen. Because I've seen some stuff that you will be surprised. I can't find it right this second, but I will eventually show it to you. But it's a picture of J. Edgar Hoover with the feds right. And you know, for many decades, for all intents and purposes, he was the federal government. And you say, well, then why was he coming down on the black people? The elders mentioned that there was a Moor up in Cleveland, I think, who was mixing this Moorish teachings with black nationalism. And I heard that the FBI stepped to the brother and said, listen, it was your fathers who put us in place to protect us when y'all fell from power. And we will kill anybody or deal with anybody who advocates overthrow. I don't care if they call them, if they're white, they're mafia, whatever. So they said, you better talk to that brother. See, we got to understand what we're dealing with here and who we really are. They know when they see you with this on your head, believe me, they know that you know who you are. And they respect you properly for that. You'll be surprised at the response you get. And it's not even about that. It's about us uplifting ourselves and returning ourselves to the right place so we can get the planet back on track. Like I said, when the cats away, the mice will play. That's what's been going on. While we've been sleeping, this beast's been ruining our planet.
You know what is very important about it? I know at least everybody in this area here knows about the King Arthur Plan. And if you look at the King Arthur Plan, every organization on there, the
Black Muslims,
everybody but the Moors.
That's right. You don't see no Moors listed on that. You won't see no Moors listed on none of them organizations there. Because if you're a Moor, you know who you are. This is yours anyway. You just got to wake up and claim what's rightfully yours. And what I'm giving you now will give you the historical basis to substantiate your claim. This is ours. And what the Empress has done in Louisiana is this example. That's set the precedent what's going to happen, a lot more of what's going to happen as we begin to claim our land here in this hemisphere. Our brothers all up and down this hemisphere. We got to realize who we are. We're over 100 million strong. Over that, way over that amount in this hemisphere. If we realize who we are and wake up and do what we got to do on this planet, and we claim this, our brothers that claim Africa, claim that over there, we can get this planet back on track the way it's supposed to be. But time is short, you know. A lot of things, they have a lot of things. See, he was given power. As long as you don't realize who you are as a Moor, and you call yourself black, Negro, all this other stuff, he has the right to do whatever he want to do to you. He could do anything to you. Anything. And this is what he's doing now. You see what's happening now. Just to diverge for a minute, you know, just so we can see what's taking place here and how critical we at a very important junction in time right now. They closed down the military. Janet Reno, who's the Attorney General, said that they was going to use the closed down military bases as work camps. Now what has happened is that the prison system has replaced the factories in the white communities. And guess what? We are the raw materials of this factory. This is how all the white men that lost them jobs or whatever, the factories closed down, now they open up a prison. So now they're correctional officers, and they got to make the uniforms and suits and all. Those are jobs. And we the raw materials. We being set up. We like cattle being led to the slaughterhouse. Right up in New York, New Jersey, in that region up there, they had forced everybody to get immunizations for measles. You couldn't attend college. When I walked into campus in the fall semester, they had a list of everybody's name who didn't get shots, saying you cannot come on here if you didn't get your shot. I said, what? Now they forced the people. Now all of a sudden there's a massive outbreak of measles on the college campuses. A state of emergency. Now this is a coincidence. You just did vaccinations and now all of a sudden there's an outbreak? And then all the kids are talking about, I'm going to get my vaccination shot. Cattle being led to the slaughterhouse and don't realize it. You know, in terms of the gang warfare and all the different things that's going on. For instance, Clinton just recently said that they're going to pass a bill. They want to pass a bill giving the police the right to go up into public house without search the house with no warrant, nothing, because of what's happening in Chicago. Think about that for a minute. You're talking about a police state. And the thing about it, we are calling for the police state. They know they can't. We're saying, man, crime is too much in my neighborhood. Oh, man, I'll give up the right of privacy for the right to live. You are calling for a police state. And they say, we'll oblige you. We'll give it to you. That's what you want. You know, so we got to wake up. Things is happening. So many things is happening now. They passed so many laws. This, that, this, the state. We got to declare independence from United States society and build ourselves. I'm going to get into that more towards the end. Let me just continue on. And this book just gets into all types of artifacts, hieroglyphics that was found. As a matter of fact, to show you how this is one world of our empire, the recent edition of Nexus magazine has an article in here that deals with, it says, Mystery Rock Carbons, Proof of Atlantis. And it shows you in Australia, they found hieroglyphics in Australia. Straight up hieroglyphics, cartouches and all. We had a vast global network and the technology was advanced. Here's a picture of model airplanes that were found in Central America. Aerodynamically built, look like modern airplanes. We was dealing with space flight, the whole nine. None of these things was new to us. I have a videotape here, the facing pyramids on Mars. And what they did, this is a lecture given inside the United Nations. There's a whole complex they found up there with numerous structures. When they measured the angles of those and the measurements of that complex up there, they gave key formulas of physics and geometry. And they matched up with the megalithic structures we built down here, the pyramids, Stonehenge, so on and so forth, showing this was all one technology we was dealing with. Ain't nothing new under the sun. We was dealing with all these things that we think is new now. We always had knowledge of these things. Let me just read through this article here. Oh, and also to show you something else, showing you the discrepancy in regards to chronology. There's a whole section of books from the Bible, whatever that they call apocrypha, books that was left out from the Bible. One of the books is a book called the Book of Baruch. And you begin to see why they left these books, because it contradicts a lot of what they're saying. This book, so-called, deals with Nebuchadnezzar and the so-called Babylonian captivity. But you're going to find out that when they talk about Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian captivity of the children of Israel, the children of Yaqub, it was really dealing with the period of time when the Moorish nation had enslaved the Europeans. We enslaved them before they enslaved us. Now I know, hold up. That's right. We had them enslaved on a global level for 360 years. This is why they was able to enslave us, because according to the divine law of retribution, what goes around, come around. And this is why the Moorish Empire fell. And you said, wait, they declared independence from Britain. You think they declared the independence in 1776? When they declared the independence from the Moorish nation. And when I first heard, I said, oh, that's crazy. What are you talking about, the Moorish nation? It was white people from England. I found a book called Diplomatic Relations with the Barbary Powers from 1776 up. And in it, it said that in 1776, Britain, France, Germany, Denmark, Italy, all these countries were paying tribute to Morocco. They were paying tribute to the Moors. You don't pay tribute unless you're a conquered nation. They were paying tribute to the Moors. And we were using them as mercenary forces. This thing is deep. Now, dealing with the Babylonian captivity of the Jews, and this is a time when they learned a lot, the children of Israel, this time when they learned a lot of what they learned. Now, I'm distinguishing between the 12 tribes of Israel, which we are, and the children of Israel, or Yaqub, whose name was changed to Israel after he did his experimentation. And they were enslaved by the Moroccan Babylonian Empire, who were Moors. And to show you how they fooled around with time, it says here, as will be shown, now this is the book of Baruch, it says, as will be shown the sequel tragic events of 586 BC, which herald the exile, constitute a thin historic drapery which invests the yet greater tragedy of the Jewish race in AD 70. It is now generally accepted by recent critics that Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar represent the persons of Vespasian and Titus, which is around 70 AD. So here, they're talking about something that happened, they say 586 of BC, then with Nebuchadnezzar. Then here they're saying it's really dealing with Vespasian and Titus. And then if you take it further, you find it's really dealing with something else. So you see the games that was being played here with chronology and geography. And see, we can't accept the chronology and geography they have given us and just be content with just saying it was black people. No, let's question the whole geography and chronology they have given us. Here's another article. This was taken from a book called The Science of the Mexican Pyramids. Now, I think Brother Emiola has the one dealing with the Egyptian pyramids. He should try also get the one with the Mexican pyramids. There was an article in it, and it shows all these Moors whose head was decapitated and put on poles and put on sticks. And check out what it says. It says, designed for the detection and punishment of heretics, the Inquisition was used as a giant pork barrel for the enrichment of crown, church, and inquisitors, while cheerfully eliminating dangerous radicals. Now listen to who these dangerous radicals.
Now listen, the word Inquisition takes you back to why I tell y'all, if you want to know what happened, how we became slaves, you have to study the Spanish Inquisition.
Who's are those who have been taught medicine, geography, rhetoric, chemistry, physics, mathematics, and astronomy by Moorish philosophers. Moorish philosophers. I'm just going to wait till you put the tape in. And this decapitation was taking place in Mexico. This ain't in Spain. This is in Mexico. Dates. It doesn't have a date on this particular page here, but I'm sure it's around 1600, somewhere around that time. Somewhere around that time, time of the conquistadors and so on and so forth. And it says that the ones who did Inquisition was conferred, dangerous radicals were considered were the ones who was teaching mathematics, geography, rhetoric, all these things at that time. These are the ones who they were decapitating. It says the Inquisition was also an excuse to rid the planet of such organized mystics as Illuminati, pantheists, Manichaeans, and Albigensians. So Moors, all these are represented all in one breath as one thing. This Inquisition was for all these so-called people. This is one example of the connection between them. And it says, all the accused were presumed guilty before trial. Now, these are so-called Christians. All the guilty were presumed guilty before there was even a trial. Sounds familiar. Sounds like what's happening to us now. A trial which took place in absolute secrecy. Sounds like the backroom police stations. The defendant was afforded no counsel. Accuser and judge were the same person. The names of witnesses against the defendant were withheld from him. Women, children, and slaves could not be used as witnesses by the defendant, but could be used by the prosecution, who could obtain them by torture. And it says minor penalties could be commuted, paid off, bribery, we know the corruption already. And then it says, now check this, it says, the victim's goods were subject to confiscation and were incorporated into the royal and church domains.
The KKK got their robes from the black group, or the original Moorish group of, or what you want to call the true Illuminatis, which was us. We walked around with white robes on.
We talk about reparations. And this is Europeans saying where our wealth went to. It says that the victim's goods, subject to confiscation, we're talking about land, gold, everything, subject to confiscation, were incorporated into the royal crown and the church domains. The inquisitors who paid no taxes and gave no account of confiscation effectively took their share. As a deterrent to possible opposition in New Spain, Mexico, 34 Negroes, including 4 women, were hanged and decapitated in Mexico City. So as a deterrent against the Moors, Illuminati, all the stuff like this, as a deterrent, they hanged 30 Negroes and nobody else. So what is that telling you? That was us, the Moors, the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, who was teaching geography and all this. You see, you got to read between the lines, because they'll tell you by so many words. They can't outright tell you, because they're under open obligation not to. They can't tell you who you are outright. They could never tell you that you were Moors and that you had a Moorish empire just prior to their 1776 Declaration of Independence. They can't tell you that. Their system is based on you not knowing that, and they maintain themselves. Here's a picture, and we think over there, they switch geography around. We think over there is England. The elders told that the original England is over here in Virginia, Jamestown, King James, Jamestown, Virginia, and that what they over there call England now, we used to call Albion or Albion. That hit me. I said, what are you talking about? Then I came across a book, and it says, Sir Francis Drake claimed the land of his. They're talking about California. It says that Drake claimed the land in the name of his queen Elizabeth I. He called it Nova Albion. Nova meaning new, and Albion being an old name from England, for England. So it is by their own scholars that the original name of that place was Albion or Albine because of the white cliffs of Dover. Albine meaning white, those white cliffs of Dover. So all this stuff is starting to click and make sense, and the stuff that just seems so far-fetched on one hand, upon doing the research, starts to make a lot more sense. Here, I'm just going to show some pictures here, because a lot of the children, a lot of the Europeans, famous Europeans you see in history or whatever, were actually the mulatto mixed breed children of Moorish nobles and rulers and white women who were in their harems. See, this is where the bleaching out took place. And people who you see in early history here in America, like John Hanson, who were really Moors, were passing as if they were white. What happened was that white women were sold on a global level. They were sold on a global level to Moorish harems all over the world. And the mulatto mixed breed children that you've seen came through them so-called this is where you get the so-called Turks, Arabs, Japanese, Indians. These are the mixed children of us on a global scale. Now, people say, what do you mean we had the Europeans enslaved and we were selling white women on a global scale? There's a lesson here. This is one of the lessons from the packet. This is the fourth one of Big Ben Bay. And in it, like what they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Here's a picture taken from J. Rogers' book, and here you see a Moor with a fez on selling a white woman into slavery. A Moor with a fez on. This is one of the reasons why the Moors fell, because we did it to our own sometime also. Here you see a harem scene with white women in a Moorish harem. All right? So, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Now, look at some of these people here. This right here is King Philip II, Philip III, son of King Philip II. And you could just tell by the lips and everything who is. He looked like one of our Spanish brothers or whatever. And here is a picture of King Philip II. These various rulers up in Europe. See, originally they were all so-called blackamoors, what they call blackamoors, and eventually through the bleaching out process, it became what's known as tawny Moors, or lighter-skinned Moors. That's where you get this whole thing about tawny Moors. Here's Alexander Farnese, Duke of Parma, the great Spanish general. All mulatto Moors. And they were more refined than the other savage Europeans because they grew up in the courts of the Moors. So they learned how to do like us, and how to behave amongst us. And here's even a picture of Sir Francis Drake, so-called, bad guy. You can see too. He was a mulatto Moor, if you look carefully. I know brothers, they look just like him. I have a picture here also of King John, the so-called signer of the Magna Carta. And here you see, he looked just like a brother with two brothers standing in the back of him. King John of England, who so-called signed the Magna Carta. This thing is so deep. I mean, so much history's been left out. And here you see, he looked just like a brother with two brothers.
Remember Jay-Z had the album called Magna Carta? The Magna Carta was an agreement between the European and the Moors. Do your research. And let me show you the other picture they about to show you.
In the background, King John of England, who so
King John.
called signed the Magna Carta. This thing is so deep. I mean, so much history has been left out. Here's a picture of Vesalius, one of the great scientists dealing with anatomy and everything. And you can see, I mean, he has an afro. He has an actual afro. So, I mean, there's no doubt he got an actual afro in this picture. And he was the founder. All these great people we see in Europe, God, most of these were the sons of Moorish rulers and European women. And then I'm going to get into the other class you hear about the Bilderberg group and what's known as the black nobility. And I said, wait, Rothschild, why are Europeans, so-called white Europeans calling themselves black nobility? Where did that come from? And then you get into Jay Rogers' book, Sex and Race, and you look at the coat of arms of the nobility up in Europe, Germany, France. All these are Moors. Let me just, to prove that they were Moors, and I'm using the specific word Moors. Now, I'm not saying black, I'm saying they were Moors. Dealing with nationality, it says Negroes in the coat of arms of noble family. And you know, with Jerry Rogers, you just got to get past the word Negro when you read his books. He got heavy information in his books. You just got to overlook that little word Negro. And here's the noble families these are the French, Italian, Spanish, and Polish noble families. And look at the names. Morelensia, Moret, Moretti, Moreau, Moresque, Moors. All Moors, ruling all throughout Europe. These are the ones from Dutch and Belgian families. And look at the names again. Moreau, Morreal, Moor, straight up Moor, M-O-O-R, straight up. Moors ruling Europe. You know, so there's a whole history, there's a whole aspect of our history. I'm going to read this part now, too, coming from a book. The desk is starting to get messy now, but that's supposed to happen. This is the heavy book here, Ancient and Modern Britain. And if you can't get your hands on hold of this, there's 2 volumes. And through almost every page of these 2 volumes, all he talks about is Moors, how we were ruling up in Britain, Scotland, Ireland, and all those places we were ruling up into. Those so-called marauding bands of gypsies, Egyptians, some of them are the deposed Moorish nobility, that when they were deposed from power, they became so-called marauding bands of gypsies. This is why you see a gypsy sometime in Europe, dark-skinned, dirt poor with a title of nobility. Where did you get this title of nobility? They were the former rulers who were deposed from power. Now in this book, he mentions in here, and because see, there's a whole part of our history, we don't get into all this. What about all this up here? All up into here. All this. We was working this up here. All this up in here. That was all us. All our navigators was all up in here. We just look at this. All of this down here. All that. It's all this. In this book he mentions here, you heard about the Druids, so-called builders of Stonehenge. As you told me, I said, wait, England is, all right, Stonehenge is in England, Stonehenge is in England, and England is ruled by white people. England is for white people. There's white people there. So they built it? And were they the ancient Druids themselves? No. Those are Moorish priests. We don't have science.
And also there's a book out on Druid religion is dealing with Isis and Osiris.
Exactly. And it'll make sense because when you look at up in England, they got places in England called Little Egypt. Actually called Egypt. Which the word gypsies come from. Gypsies. And then he says in here, so he says, this is a white person now, David McRitchie is a white person now. So then the Druids and Druidesses, because they were priestesses also, who had colleges in an island near the coast of Brittany, who professed a knowledge of the future, who the men at least were figured as bearded like goats, with a goatee, just like you see the dog on, and who worshipped the gods, were dark-skinned, curly-haired Iberians of the tribes of Silures and Damanine. This seems a fair inference. In other words, he's outright telling you who these people are. They were dark-skinned, curly-haired. All right? I'm going to read a couple of things here just to give you an idea. This thing is just action-packed. This is too much. This is too much in this book. These books. He drops too much about this. Definition of Moor. Any Latin dictionary, any old one at least, will tell you that Moorish is a Moor, a black Moor, or a tawny Moor. And Shakespeare uses the word Moor as a synonym for Negro. And then he goes on in here and he mentions how, remember I said Moors as navigators. And you will find the word Moor always associated with water. He says here, Therefore, if the word Moor and its variations were primarily the sea, and Latin or Spanish, the mare or whatever, means sea or whatever, mare, more, all the same thing, primarily the sea, and gave its name to a nation of sea rovers, or if the case were reversed, and the sea became associated with the name of a great seafaring race, or if the case were reversed, and the sea became associated with the name of a great seafaring race, Moors, did a wider feast that opens out before us. There has been much written about the Mermanen and other water people. And they talk about places named Moravia, connected with the Moors, Morini, Moray in India, Mori or Mauritania in Africa, just showing the vastness of this empire. The Maori, South.
Dan Calloway put out this old map from from like 17, the early 1700s, no, late 1600s, and it showed that on the map at the bottom it says the Mauritanians and the Indian Associates, and this was a map in Americas. They said on the land.
Pacific, Moravia, Romans.
Just to show you where it's at, be checking out. Catch the rest of this lecture and Moorish history, what they don't teach you 101. Hakeem Bey, BH.